Welcome back in, everybody. Thanks for hanging out with us on this Monday. Happy Juneteenth, one and all. All right, Phillies, Derek, it had very similar to what last year looked like. And we figured, you know what, man, we haven't talked to Anthony all season about the Phillies. What better time?
He's been avoiding us.
He's been avoiding you, not me, pal.
Me?
All right,
can we just all get along?
He didn't say anything to you publicly, so I have to say it for him. It's you, Derek. It's all you. No. Anthony SanFilippo joins us from Crossing Broad. You can check him out. Does an awesome job, just daily coverage on Crossing Broad, but also his podcasts. Crossed Up, if you get a chance to check that out, if you're a Phillies fan, Crossed Up, the Phillies podcast is really, really, really good, as well as Snow the Goalie, talking a little Flyers there with their buddy Bundy, among others. Ant, what's up, man? How are you?
Yeah, you texted me and asked me if I could do Phillies talk. Then you say you might get a little Flyers question. I was scrambling there for the last 10 minutes, just trying to get ready to prepare for the Flyers conversation. So
I know, because you were just completely out on everything that's happening with Flyers. And so let's start with Phillies, though. Look, it does have a lot of the earmarks of last year. I know there's no managerial change and all those kind of things, but eerily similar, man. I mean, this June run that they're on thus far, and I know it coincides with Schwarber's month and, all that good stuff. Harper's back and all that, but man, 13-15 is nothing to sneeze at in 5 straight series.
No, it's been great. And what I like most about it, Rob, I think that what's really kind of underrated is that in this stretch where they've played really well, they have found ways to win games that they were losing earlier this season. Like, we've seen them come back. We've seen them have the big blowout games, right? Where they've win 15-3 or whatever the case might be. They've had those 5 walk-offs, and the bullpen has saved them a few times. But we hadn't seen them earlier this season win ugly. And these last 2 games against Oakland, they had to win ugly. And I'm watching that game Saturday where they're going extra innings, and I'm thinking, they would lose this game a month ago.
Yeah.
And then even yesterday they have 4 players out, right? Nobody, 2 regulars out of the lineup, 2 relievers unavailable. And you're thinking, yeah, this could be one where they slip up. Wheeler's not throwing his best. He was good, but not his best. And you think, okay, they can blow this one too. And they don't. So like when you find that you're winning those types of games as well, that tells me that things are going in the right direction for the team. And yes, it's very similar to what was going on last year at this time.
Hey, Anthony, is it just mind-boggling to you how all of a sudden when it turns to the month of June, the light switch just goes on for Schwarber? I can't remember anything like this.
I'm out of words, Gunnar. I really am. I don't know how to describe it because, when it happens last year and you sit there and say, well, in his history, he's been good in June. And then it happens last year, like, oh, okay, well, that's a thing. And then he gets off to a terrible start, even worse start this year. And you're thinking, okay, it can't just be, that you flip the calendar to June 1st and all of a sudden everything's fine again.
Right.
And holy cow, it is. And it's hard to explain. I mean, yes, it's the time of year where power hitters are able to hit the ball a little bit better because the ball carries more once it gets warm. Mm-hmm. I get that, but it's more than just that. I mean, he had 3 hits in that game. He's the player of the game yesterday. He's the reason they win the game yesterday. And yes, one of them was a home run, but he had 2 other hits that were huge in the game. And then he's walking a lot more. His OPS is through the roof. That's what's befuddling. Like, where was this for the first 2 months of the season? And it's hard to really explain.
And that's the thing, Ed. Like I would consider myself very much old school and of the mindset, like, how can a guy hitting 180 be your leadoff guy? We go through all those kind of things, but you're right. I mean, if you cut through it, first of all, there's the impact of the leadoff home run, which I don't care what anybody says. It dramatically affects both teams.
Yes.
There's a tone set, but his OPS, like you said, is through the roof. He does walk. So yes, it's not Lenny Dykstra and Pete Rose back in the day. It's different. But it still works for this team. Whatever it is, it works for the rest of the lineup.
Yeah, it's very unconventional. And it's funny because if you look at Bryce Harper right now, right? Harper's hitting 300. Mm-hmm. He gets on base, but his power is zapped. He doesn't have the power stroke yet since coming back from the Tommy John. It's almost as if they are flipping the roles a little bit. Like Harper's hit numbers are your more traditional top of the order guys, and Schwarber's numbers are your more traditional middle of the order guys. Yet for some reason with this team, it just seems to work better this way. And I can't explain it. I don't understand why. But hey, when it's going this good, you learn not to ask why. You just let it be and enjoy it, right?
Amen.
I talk about this all the time. You look at the Phillies, they have this rarity. They have a lineup 1 through 9, and I don't care who's batting 6, 7, 8, or 9th. They can put so much pressure on a pitcher. A pitcher cannot it's not allowed to breathe a sigh of relief when you face this lineup. Now, a lot of teams, once you get past number 5 or 6, you can say, okay, I can make mistakes and still dominate. Now with this lineup, and I think that's a big part of the psychological edge this team has night in and night out when they step to the plate against any opposing pitcher.
And I think that's exactly what it is, Gunnar. I think it is a psychological edge because not everybody's always going to be going at the same time. Right? We've seen that. I mean, you'll have 2 guys that are hot, 7 guys that aren't, right? But at the same time, you know that the ability is there, that with this lineup, this lineup can grind you. It had, they can force your starting pitcher to throw a ton of pitches, even if they don't score runs. I mean, we had a couple innings this year where a starting pitcher has thrown 25 or 30 pitches in an inning. Phillies didn't even score. And but they worked them, right? And so that gets them out of the game earlier. You get into bullpens earlier, and unless you have a dominant bullpen, that's what you want. You want to get into teams' bullpens. So like that's what you're, that I think is what you're pointing out, and I think it's really another underrated stat about this team is that they can do that to pitchers, and even if they're not scoring runs, they create that kind of imbalance and confidence shaking in the pitchers. And I think that's what makes them so dangerous.
Real quick, Ed, just to touch on your point a little bit earlier about the runs, maybe games they maybe would have lost earlier in the year. They're 16-7 in 1-run games. It's the second best in baseball. Yeah. Only the Marlins are better in 1-run games than the Phillies this year.
Well, that speaks to the bullpen. Yeah, and more than anything else, it speaks to the bullpen. The Phillies bullpen is literally the best in the game. I mean, because it's deep, and you may look at individual numbers and you see ERAs that are a little high, like Kimbrel's, for example, and Soto, and even the kid Marte, who's been lights out for them lately. And you sit there and go, well, how can you say that? I mean, look at their ERAs. Yeah. When you break it down, they had a couple of bad outings early in the season, and that's what makes those numbers look worse. But when you look at them over the stretch, and it's been almost 2 months now, maybe just shy of 2 months, this bullpen has been sensational. And they are the reason that in 1-run games, the Phillies are able to pull them out because they don't give up runs. They just don't, and they don't walk a ton of guys. I think that the Phillies are amongst the league leaders in fewest home runs allowed out of the bullpen as well. Like, I mean, they just really don't give up big innings. And if your starters are only going to go 5 or 6, and then you can rely on those guys to keep you in, that's awesome. But now look at what the starters have done in June. Since the beginning of June, they're the best rotation in baseball for the last 2 weeks. Then you have that bullpen behind it. That's the strength of this team. And that's why this team, when you look at it, you say, they're only 4 games over 500. Yeah. But this is a team that if they can get into the playoff spot and get into the playoffs, they are built for a playoffs. And that's why
just to stay on that. Think about what they were tasked to do early in the year, the bullpen. Wheeler wasn't Wheeler yet.
Yeah.
Nola hasn't been Nola all year.
Right.
Suarez is hurt. It's kind of just a bunch of guys, and they're being asked to throw a ton of innings. Like Bilotti's arm fell off at one point. You know what I mean? So to be as good as they've been, and you're right, some of the numbers are misleading because it was that early part of the season, especially guys like Kimbrel. They've been awesome, and you can use them in a lot of different roles. You need Alvarado in the 8th yesterday. Okay. Whatever. You can go matchups. Not a lot of managers have that luxury. No,
the Phillies have 4 lefties in the bullpen. I mean, how many teams have 4 there are some teams who don't even have a lefty.
Yeah.
I think it was Detroit, right? They didn't have a lefty. So they have 4, and then you have 3 really good right-handed arms. I know Dominguez is on IL right now, but if you count him and Kimbrel, and now Marte is showing signs. And then even if you go depth, where you got guys like Jeff Hoffman, and then they had to send down Bilotti and they had to send down Brogdon, but even those guys are guys that you can rely on in middle innings down the road. There's just great depth there, and everybody throws 97, 98.
Yeah.
Alvarado's outing was it the other night where he threw 16 straight pitches over 100 miles per hour. I mean, who's doing that? I mean, and that's what makes them so good, and that's why people should be really excited about the Phillies going forward. I know it's a big matchup with the Braves this week, and everybody's going to say, well, this is a measuring stick, and that's fine. But even if they lose 2 out of 3 to the Braves, you shouldn't get down on them again. I think that there's so much good here when you go forward. This team's going to be there in the end of the season.
I still don't know what to make of Aaron Nola, though, because I think at this stage of the season, we keep saying we're waiting for him to pull out of it, come out of it. I think this is what you're going to get from Nola for the rest of the season. I don't know if the contract, I don't know if it's mechanics, but I think this is Nola for 2023.
It's an interesting thing, Gunnar, with him, because if you look at when he's in the windup, he's one of the best pitchers in baseball.
Mm-hmm.
His numbers out of the windup are Cy Young worthy. I mean, I'm not being, I'm not just saying that to say that. He's legitimately that good. When he goes into the stretch, he's getting rocked. Yep. And what happens? Like, why is that happening? Now, if it is something mechanical, which Ruben Amaro was saying on the broadcast in his last start, then you have to think that that's something that can be fixed. Mm-hmm. Right? If it's something mechanical. So maybe you feel a little bit better about Aaron Nola looking at it that way. And when you look at him compared to the rest of baseball with what he's doing numbers wise, he's actually not as bad as we think he is. I think we put a lot of pressure on him because he's our guy and he's expected to be an ace and all these things. And that's pitching in Philadelphia, right? I mean, that's just and part of it is on him. He's got to make those adjustments too. But I don't look at it and think of it as this is something that is going to be chronic. It can be fixed. It's a matter of will they get it fixed. I like to think that they will because of what we've seen from Nola in the past. But you could be right. This could be that 2009 Cole Hamels where he had that great run in 08, pitched really long, all of a sudden comes back the next year, the arm's not the same, and then it just ends up not being a great season. Could well be that. But I still think that there's time for him to get it right.
And the other thing, I think that at first glance, you wouldn't be all that impressed with the bench. And you'd say to yourself, man, they're okay off the bench. But I look at it this way. Look at what Pache's all of a sudden giving them with the defensive outfield options. And I'll tell you what, he affected this series in a big way with the bat as well and on the base pass.
Yep.
You look at what Cody Clemens has done. He's not lighting the world on fire, but they didn't fall off a cliff either at first base. Like, they have gotten help from guys here off of the bench.
Well, I wrote a story last week where I suggested that the Phillies' biggest need is not necessarily pitching, that it's actually a right-handed power bat at this point. Mm-hmm. Because if you can add a right-handed power bat, especially somebody who can play the corner infield, whether it be first or third base, I think that makes your bench automatically better. I think Pache is pushing Rob, and I wouldn't be surprised. I'm going to keep an eyeball on this, but I think it's going to be a little bit more of a platoon in center field than people think. I think Pache is going to play a lot more than people think in center field. I think him and Marsh are going to split that because he doesn't need to hit 300. If Christian Pache hits 240 and plays the kind of defensive center field he can play and run the bases the way he can run the bases, he's far more impactful than Brandon Marsh is. And that's not a knock on Brandon Marsh. Marsh is an okay center fielder. He's good. And he's an okay hitter, although he's hitting 160.
He struggled lately.
Since May 1st. I mean, it's really bad since May 1.
Yeah.
So, I mean, when you look at it that way, I think that's going to be what you have. And then, so that makes automatically one good bench piece. And if you add a power bat that can play either first or third, you assume Bohm goes to the other side. That puts Clemens on the bench. That puts Sosa in a role that he belongs in because he's not an everyday player, but it makes him a better player as a guy coming off the bench who can play once or twice a week. It really makes the bench that much better. So I think that's really everybody's going to be looking for the Phillies to add pitching. They may add a guy, but it's going to be more kind of back end of the rotation type. Their big piece that they're going to go after this trade deadline is going to be a right-handed power bat. And
do you think it could be Goldschmidt?
It could be. Now, here's the thing. What will the Cardinals want?
That's a lot.
Well,
they're going to start with Painter, right?
Well, if you go Painter, I'm out.
Yeah, I'm out too.
I'm out if you go Painter. Yeah. But if it's Abel and say Johan Rojas, who's like their young center fielder, or Muzziotti, who's having a really nice year down in the minor leagues, and then you add in like another lower level prospect that's kind of on the rise or something along those lines, then I'm okay with it. If again, I don't want to lose Mick Abel. I think that he's going to be a really good starter as well. But it's easier for me to give up on Abel knowing that Painter's still there, whereas I can't give up on Painter. I think he's one of the top. I mean, not just me. Everybody thinks he's one of the top pitching prospects in the game. So yeah, I wouldn't do it for Painter. But if you could do it for multiple guys down the line, yeah, then I would do it for Goldschmidt.
Would you give up frontline players to get a Goldschmidt in here? Let's say the Cardinals don't want prospects. Let's say they want a player that can help them right now.
So
who would you give up?
A player from the current team?
Yeah, who would you give up?
That's a good question. I don't know if you can.
Yeah. Think about it. I mean, everybody talked about Reese Hoskins being trade bait last year. Obviously, he's not playing this year. Now, Cardinals feel maybe they're deep enough in the pitching staff, but they need another position player. Then Goldschmidt's not quite that player, but we need something somewhere else.
You know what's funny? If we said that, if you posed this before the season, we'd be lining up Nick Castellanos, right? We don't be driving him to
not
the
me,
airport.
not me, Rob.
It's true. Well, most of us.
Yeah. That's a great question. I don't know if there's anybody on the current roster that I would say, oh yeah, I'll move this guy, as far as a frontline piece.
Right.
Nor do I think that there's a pitcher on the roster that I would consider moving right now. I think it would have to be all prospects. And look, when you look at the Cardinals, the reason that they've struggled this year has not been because they can't hit. It's because they can't pitch.
Right.
So they're probably going to be looking for pitching prospects. So I think the Phillies have what it takes to get it. I just think that they have to get the Cardinals off of Painter. And if you get the Cardinals off of Painter, then you can make it happen. Otherwise, I think you look elsewhere.
Yeah, you got to hope they keep losing because it's been miserable for St. Louis. That's for sure. Hey, let me give you a little update here. Phillies have recalled Derek Hall from his rehab assignment with Lehigh Valley, reinstated him from the 60-day IL, optioned him to Lehigh Valley to make room for him. They've designated Dalton Guthrie for assignment. It's a long way of saying Dalton Guthrie's out of here, but
yeah,
he's gonna have to earn his way back, right? Ant, with the way that Clemens is playing.
Yeah, they basically Rob Thompson has said he's got to hit down there.
Yeah,
and if he's hitting down there, if he's hitting home runs, okay, fine, then you can consider making that flip flop, right? But if he's not doing that, if he's not doing what they need him to do, Clemens has got the job right now.
Mm-hmm.
So, and as for Guthrie, he's DFA'd. Somebody might take a chance on him, but I don't think that they will. And if that's the case, my guess is if he clears through and doesn't get traded, doesn't get picked up, he'll end up back in the minors with this team because they do still like Dalton Guthrie a little bit.
Hey, let me ask you. I'm not. I'll just tell you that I'm not worried about Harper's power. I mean, you basically had reconstructive elbow surgery. Yeah, I know that's starting to kind of become a thing. And are you worried about it? To me, he wasn't even supposed to be back by this point.
No, I'm not worried about it in the long run. But I think when you look at this team, you take away, you take Hoskins out of the lineup, and now you say Harper's there and he can hit 300, but he's not going to be a 30 home run guy. Mm-hmm. I mean, really, he's got 3 home runs right now. Does he reach 20 by the end of the season? I'm not sure that he does. So if that's the case, who else besides Schwarber's hitting 20 home runs? Nobody, right? Yeah. So that's why it's a little bit of a concern long term for this season. Anyway, I'm not long term beyond this year, long term this season. And that's why I think you have to consider going and getting more power because you just don't have another guy who's going to hit those home runs with any kind of regularity in your lineup.
We had Larry Anderson on late last week, and one of the things I brought up he agreed with was Alex Bohm has really settled in and started playing a nice third base compared to where he was playing it last year. And obviously with him hitting the ball the way he is, man, he's becoming more and more of a complete player for this team on the corner.
Yeah, he could play either third or first, and he's actually looking. He made a nice play at first base to end that game against Oakland as well. So, I agree. I like him a lot. The only thing that I think is he goes through these stretches where he hits the ball down into the ground a lot. Yeah, and I think that's still a thing because he's still young. Right? I mean, we forget sometimes this is only his 4th year in the league now, right? And so like you kind of forget that he's got to kind of develop that still. There's still things he can grow. I like him long term. I wish he would be more of that power guy. I think he's got it in him. We've obviously seen it. He can drive the ball to the gaps. He can hit the ball over the wall a little bit. I'd like to see him do that with a little bit more regularity. He does get into these hit the ball on the ground kind of things, but he's the second best RBI guy on the team right now behind Castellanos. He's really good with runners in scoring position, and he does have a pretty professional approach at the plate, right? He doesn't usually look ugly at the plate. So those are all things that are very positive about Alec Bohm. Right, and I think that's why he's part of this group. And when you were asking me, could you trade somebody from the roster? That was the only name that I would sit there and go, maybe that's a guy that has some appeal, right? But I still think that there's going to be so much more from him that I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't move Alec Boehm. I think
Yeah, and Ben Davis swears up and down the guy can be a batting champion because of the approach that he takes. I mean, we'll see as how he develops. I had this theory, and it's one of the reasons why I didn't write them off from still reaching the playoffs even after the bad start is as much as you don't want to do it, they have the experience to reach back to from last year with these starts. It's there. It's there with the core of these guys. There isn't a panic with them as much as it may even drive fans nuts because they want Thompson to flip tables, but they're a very steadying kind of force team. And I think we're seeing it here now.
Yeah, I think so too. And when you look at around the National League, I mean, aside from Atlanta, who really sticks out to you and says, oh man, that would be a bad matchup for the Phillies?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think Florida keeps this up, personally.
No, they're beating a bunch of bad teams, and that's good for them. I mean, that's what you're supposed to do, right?
Yeah.
But if you look at Florida's August schedule, it's brutal. And the Phillies are part of it, but they have like 8 series in a row against really good teams. Some from the American League, some from the National League, and so that's a tough run for them. And I think that's probably when they're going to fall back. But they're still good. I think they got a shot. I mean, I think they got a shot to make the playoffs. But you really, I mean, when you look at it, the Phillies showed against Arizona, they showed their weakness. The Arizona Diamondbacks have no pitching. Nice lineup. Mm-hmm. They have very little pitching, but beyond Zach Gallen, Merrill Kelly a little bit, and that's it. And then you look at the Dodgers; they're in a little bit of a trouble with pitching as well. They have no bullpen, and they have a bunch of starters that are hurt.
Injuries,
so who knows what's going to happen there? So really, I mean, is there another team in the National League you go, oh yeah, well, they're probably better than the Phillies? I don't. I see Atlanta, and that's it. So, yeah, it doesn't like look. The Phillies showed last year they could do it in a wild card series too, and of course that best of 3 is always kind of weird. Like anybody can win a best of 3 series, right? But if anybody is going to go into a best of 3 series, they're the kind of team with their kind of mindset that I say I'm good with it. Like I think that they're in really really good shape in a best of 3 series.
Anthony, is it fair to say that it's really can't make a fair assessment of this Phillies team right now until we get to the All-Star break? And I say that because you still have the Braves, and as much as the Mets are struggling, the Mets have been a thorn in the Phillies side. And then you close out the last 6 games. You got to play the best team in baseball in Tampa and another team that's been a pain in your butt in Miami. So I think that's when we get a true gauge of what this team is not what it needs, what it does not need.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on there, Gunnar. I mean, like, you know, we're getting excited that they're 13-2 and they're now back above 500.
Yep.
And I don't think that they're going to fall below 500. I think we're past that point.
Yep.
I don't see them going into a spiral. But at the same time, yes, this is a tough stretch of games. And if you get through these stretch of games and you hit the All-Star break, let's say you're 6-7 games over 500 at that point, you're aces at that in my mind. Again, looking ahead and looking what the schedule looks like, I like where they would be. So really, they don't even need to be great over the next 2.5 weeks. They just need to be good over the next 2.5 weeks. And if they are, we're in a good spot. And the Phillies will be playing important games in September and probably October again.
All right, and as I mentioned, I know you had to scramble to familiarize yourself with that team that's on the ice, but yeah. All right, let me ask you, and I admit this might be a little bit unfair, but should there be any concern that Jonesy, Briere, Leclerc, even Sharp, although it was one of the worst trades in Flyers history, are all former players, and it has sort of the sense from some that it's too much of the old guard.
Country club mentality.
Do you worry about that at all?
I don't, not in hockey, and the reason I don't is because if you look at every hockey team, you see the same thing. I mean, there's a lot of guys former players who played for the team working for that team, you know, and it's just the nature of what the sport is, right? And really, when you think about it, you know, Patrick Sharp, I mean, like you said, I mean, he barely played here. It was 66 games. He was more of a Chicago Blackhawk than anything else. Won 3 Stanley Cups in another city. Like, I mean, he started here, but it really was not ever really tied to the Flyers. The only hire that I kind of scratched my head a little bit at was John Leclerc. Like, I'm not 100% sure bringing him in, like he hasn't been doing anything in the sport for a long time. So like, that's the one that I sit there and go, that seems like a buddy hire kind of thing to me. But the other stuff, look, we just went through an era for about 5 years with a bunch of guys who were not former Flyers.
Chuck Fletcher, Exhibit A.
and coaches that weren't former. I mean, the Vino thing failed, right? You know, and it just didn't work out. And so, and it actually bottomed out with not former Flyers in place. I think that the process that they're going through here, this is a Dan Hilferty thing, and he's really trying to make everything feel like it used to be before and say, hey, yes, these guys are former Flyers, but they know what it takes to win here. They've been through it. They've experienced it. And so let's give them the opportunity to bring us back to that point. And so, like, I think that it's fair to give them that shot. I don't think it's the old boy network, because these are not guys who are coming through that Bob Clark, Paul Holmgren, Bill Barber tree. It's a whole different tree. It may be another Flyers tree somewhere, but it's not that tree. And so therefore, I think it's worth giving them a shot to see what they can do. And look, Briere's first trade was a big one, and he got a lot. He got a lot for Ivan Provorov. Yeah. So win first trade, they win. So let's see what happens going forward.
How patient does the fan base have to be with this Flyers team? Because basically, this is a reclamation project. This is not retooling. This is starting it from the ground zero and building this thing up. And I say it's going to take at least a couple of seasons before they're respectable again.
It's going to take. They got to be very patient, Gunnar. I mean, and they're going to be not good next year. Probably not good the year after. But then I think by year 3 is when you have to have expectations kind of starting to ramp up. And really, if you look at John Tortorella's past, his 4th year was the year that his teams started to be really good. The only time that he didn't have that happen was in Vancouver. He only was because he was only there for 1 year. But if you look at his time with Tampa, with New York, and with Columbus, by the 4th year, that was when he had his teams clicking and going in the right direction. So sometimes that's what it takes. But if they're willing to wait another couple seasons, I think that there's a chance. They got to get it right. They got to get some draft picks right. They got to get some trades right. They got to not have bad contracts. They got to get rid of some of the bad contracts on the books. But if the ability to do it is there, they just have to be able to get it done.
And how real? I don't want to see this happen, but how real is the possibility that Carter Hart gets moved?
Well, it's real, but there's a big old asterisk.
His past.
Yes. And so I do know that teams have made offers to the Flyers for Danny Briere, but with Danny Briere for Carter Hart, but every one of them came with the caveat, depending on his involvement with the Team Canada rape investigation.
Yeah.
And so until that report comes out, he's not being moved. And then depending on what his involvement is, will depend if he's actually movable or not movable at that point. So Danny's got offers that he's holding on to. And if the report comes out and Carter Hart's hands are clean, great. He's going to make that trade and probably make that trade. If the report comes out and Carter Hart's involved, I'd look for a 20 to 30 game suspension somewhere in that range. Wow. And then the Flyers are going to have to make a decision, because I'm sure they're going to get some kickback. Because if you're involved in something like that, and as heinous as the reports are about what took place, I don't know what his future is in the sport at that point.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm trying to remember where I read this. They're expecting something this summer, correct, to come out in terms of official. Yeah, and
I think it's more of the NHL's PR timeline than it is anything else. I think teams want to know before the draft. I mean, the draft's coming up in 9 days.
Yeah,
they would like to know, because if there are players involved, they need to know about it. But I think the NHL is probably going to wait until a time when it's really quiet in the off season to make the announcements. Of probably mid to late July, early August. They could surprise me. They could surprise me and bring it out next week. But I think that they don't want to get in the way of these kids' great day on draft day, and they don't want to get in the way of everybody exciting about free agency on July 1. I think that they want to have it be something that's during a time of year when nobody's focused on hockey.
All right, last one for me. I know people don't know the NHL draft like maybe they do some of the other drafts, myself included. Where the Flyers are picking, is there anybody there that you particularly like who could be possible?
Yeah, well, so here's what I know. I do know that they are really interested in Matvei Michkov, who is one of the top prospects, one of the top 4 that you keep hearing about, everybody talking about. However, will they be able to get him? He's got a contract in Russia. He's a Russian-born player. Obviously, things are weird with Russia right now and Russian players. So how is that going to work? Are teams going to shy away from him? If they get the sense that teams are going to shy away, does he fall to 7? It's possible. Right now, he's kind of picked in that 4-5 range. But do those teams look at it and say, Sharks and Canadians, and go, yeah, we don't want to take that risk with a pick this high and a draft this good? Does he slip down? I think the Flyers are willing to do that. As a matter of fact,
Jalen Carter dropped.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same kind of thing. Gunnar, it's the same kind of thing.
Exactly.
Same kind of thing. I mean, not that it's anything that's personal with Mishkov.
Right.
But it's more like a situation where it's like, oh man, we don't know if we want to take this risk.
Yep.
When the Flyers are willing to do it. So that's who they would like. If not, I mean, there are other players, that are certainly out there. That are possibilities. Leonard, Benson. I don't think they're going to go defense. At least not with the 7th pick. They may go with a defenseman at 22, but if they're trying to move up from 7 to 5 to maybe get a Mishkov, they might have to include 22 in that trade.
Interesting.
So,
and good stuff. All right, so I tell everybody, check you out. Of course, Crossing Broad. You can follow him on Twitter as well at SanFilippo. Go to his podcasts also, Snow the Goalie, if you just want to keep rolling with the Flyers talk. And that's with our guy, it's with Russ Joy and Chris Terrian.
Yep.
Or you go to Crossed Up, which you do a really good job with Bob Wankel as well. So keep up the good work, Ant. Thanks for hopping on, man.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate you, man.
Hey, anytime. Appreciate it.
Take care. All right, that's Anthony SanFilippo. Kind enough to give us a couple minutes there, Derek. Get a little fills. I had to sneak in some Flyers, man. There's no way I wasn't going to sneak in a little Flyers.
That's all right.
So we make it happen. All right, so we'll come back. I want to hit you with a couple different things. Keith Pompey thinks that it's more likely than not now that James Harden is a Sixer. I know. I want to hit you with that when we come back, and we'll get into a bunch of other stuff. Coming up in the NFL segment at 2:00, Derek, we're going to do our up-down drill, meaning teams from last year that we think could be on the up and then on the down. Could be both teams. Could either way. All right, so we'll get into that coming up in the 2:00 hour, but we'll come back with some Sixers talk. All right. He is Derek. I'm Rob. We're Sports Take, JAKIB Sports YouTube Network. We keep things rolling. Let's talk about Jim Murray and Principal Financial Group, because guess what? Knowing who to trust with your hard-earned finances and savings is critical. You don't want to waste that money. You want to be able to be taken care of later in life or right now, quite frankly. And, for me, it took a while to find the right person. So I don't want you to have to go through the same thing, whether it's retirement planning, 401k review, insurance review. You might have a small business and you're trying to get those employee benefits off the ground. That's another resource that Jim can assist you with. I know personally, I've entrusted my IRA, my 401k rollovers with Jim, and I couldn't be any happier. I also love the fact that he's there as a sounding board anytime I have any questions. So you can give Jim Murray a call at 610-996-4751, 610-996-4751. You can also email him, Murray, MURRAY, .jim@principal.com. That's Murray.jim@principal.com.
Do you stream on a Roku?